Hello everyone and welcome to 3 Colours Up. In this one I'm going to be tackling Nanny for the Shades faction for Moonstone, the multi-award winning Moonstone according to Jerry. It's correct anyway. So this one is kind of a little bit different. Usually I try to aim these 3 CUs at sort of beginner level, get a force done, get it on the table and be proud of what you've done. This one was kind of a bit more freeform. I sat down to it without really an idea of what I wanted. There was a couple of little inspirational pieces that I sort of take a bit of a vibe from and try and work that into the miniature a little bit. But overall, there wasn't really a plan, so the paint selection wasn't something I already had in my head. It was just to sort of run with it and see what happens. So in this one, there is going to be a little bit of mixing up some paints here and there and just trying things out to see how they work out. And I think the end result speaks for itself. It's quite a good model. I enjoyed painting it a lot. It's nice to sort of challenge yourself occasionally, particularly when you're playing with a low model count skirmish game. You just get that little bit of feel you want to do the little extra mile just to add that little more detail, make them stand out a bit more, make those characters look unique. Anyway, let's sit down and paint a Nanny. So to begin with Nanny, who is probably one of the more creepy models I've ever worked on, I've primed her in Ash Grey, the Army Painter Spray Ash Grey primer. She is a single piece miniature, so there was nothing else really to do other than glue her to her base. So what I want to do first is tackle or discuss what I'm going to do clothing wise, because I've been watching a bit of Downton Abbey recently, and I think that black and white maid's kind of aesthetic will work well with her, but I don't want it to be clean. I don't want it to look new, because she's a shade. She's obviously a little bit on the wrong side of life. So what I'm going to try and do is probably for one of the first times in a long time where I'm going to start mixing a couple of paints. So on our top cam here, I'm going to be going with Brigadine Brown and Matte Black. So what I want is the dress to be black, but I want it to have a dirty sort of off black kind of feel to it. So we want to get some matte black down on our palette. It's really not, I should have shaken that a bit more. Bit of matte black. And then we'll take some of our Brigadine Brown, and what I want to do is just maybe just a drop. So that's about a 3 black to 1 brown ratio there, because I don't want the black to be pure black. So let's take a brush and let's start mixing that up and see what we get. This should give me a very sort of dull, muddy black, and that's really what I want, is it to be like a black cloth that it has faded and has been used, and then when we put a, like for example, if we put a strong tone or a dark tone wash over it, it will make those shadows look more black, like the original color of the cloth. Now I know black technically fades into a grey or an off blacky sort of color, but I still want her to look close enough. So I think that's going to be quite a good color once we get some wash down on that. So we'll go ahead, do all the areas that we need to be in the black material, and when we come back we'll see what that looks like. It looks like a nice rich, deep sort of dirty brown. I quite like that. I didn't want to go with any of the standard colors because I just wanted something a bit more messed up looking. So with our dark color now dry, we can have a look around the model and see what we have is a very, very, very dark brown, almost fading into black, and it'll look more black once we've actually finished it. So what I'm going to move on to now is we're going to stick with this particular element of the model, and we're going to look at the cloth patches that are all over it. And for that, we're just going to go with a Brigadine Brown. We're just going to go with that flat brown for this, because I don't want to lift the color palette too high on her dress. So we're just going to do all the patches and little repairs and stuff in this brown. So with that burgundy brown down on all the patchwork, we're going to move on to the stitches, and we're also going to move on to her apron and the trim on her uniform. So we have the little headband, we have the cuffs, the apron with this little frill here as well. And for that, we're going to go to some skeleton bone. And what I'd like to do is use the skeleton bone as sort of a base for what is essentially meant to be white material, but I want it to look a bit more stained. However, the first thing we're going to do is tackle our stitches, and there's quite a lot of stitches and repairs on her clothing. So this is going to be a case of needing to get a little bit of nice small brush, a bit of patience, and we're just going to start touching in all these stitches. Then after that, we will base coat the rest of her uniform pieces in the skeleton bone as well. So with the skeleton bone down, you can see what I'm trying to aim for here. The stitching is nice and stands out really well, and I think that little bit of a lighter brown in amongst the robe or the dress looks quite good. Now we're going to move on to washing the darker part of the dress down, and for that we're going to use some dark tone. So again, just chuck some of that onto our palette, and then just with our normal brush, we'll just apply that carefully around the skeleton bone details, but the rest of it we're just going to go quite liberal with. Really sort of hammer in that darker, deeper shadow in the model. So while the wash is drying, it's mostly dry already, so there's a little bit of added darkness and definition there on the dress. We're going to move on and focus our attention on the areas that are currently skeleton bone. And initially, because it's all the cloth, we're going to go with a brigade grey. And what I'm using this for is to very lightly sort of overbrush over the skeleton bone. And I want to do that because I don't want the material to just be a yellowy sort of weird off color. I actually want it to look like it's got hints of that white underneath it, kind of similar to what I'm doing with the rest of the dress. So we have our brigade grey. It's sort of mostly removed off the brush, a bit like a dry brush. And what I'm trying to do is sort of just work it over the creases of the material to try and coax out a little bit of a sort of shape and highlight to it. And we're not going to do too much of this. I'm kind of just focusing on just getting a bit of the broad strokes touched in this regard. You can see it dries pretty quick on the brush, so I just keep tinkering away there. Like so. You see it very quickly becomes a sort of a dry brush, and I don't quite want it to be as tidy as that. I do want it to be a little messy. Take a bit more on the brush and spread it out on the palette. And see along the back of the frock there. Not worried about the straps at the back too much. I do want to get little bits up and around the edge of the face there. Sort of like that. Now, what I want to do with that down is take some speed paint, and for that I'm going to use some Holy White. I'm going to shake it up nicely. Again, drop that on the palette. And what I'm going to aim to do this time is apply this kind of thin down, so I don't want a lot of it on the brush. And we're going to work that onto the apron as well. Because what I'm trying to aim for is just that sort of sickly kind of, not been washed in a while, sort of, it was white at one point, but now it's sort of more yellowy grey. It's kind of messed up and old. And we're typically kind of going low contrast with this model up to a point. We're going to smash some colour in with the little thingy in the ladle and her face as well. We're going to make those quite jump off the model a little bit. Yeah, we'll just apply this to try and get this uniform, this aprony sort of stuff looking just weird, just odd. Odd and neglected, I think, is the way to look at it. And yeah, I'm going over certain bits and maybe making a bit of a mess, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think that ought to do that. So we're going to let that dry. By the time that's dry, the rest of the dark tone should have dried, and then we can move on to our next step. All right, with our speed paint now dry, we're looking a bit more interesting. She has a bit more sort of fade and stuff going on here. And what I'm going to do now is sort of hammer down this sort of faded, dirty look. And for that, I'm going to use a little bit of sepia tone. And what I'm going to aim for with this is kind of just darken it a little bit in places, make it look a bit more stained. So we stir that up, and I'm using a rather small brush for this because what I want to do is work into the creases. So I kind of want to just add a bit of shadow in and around certain parts, and shading it with the sepia tone is going to make it look a little bit more nasty and hopefully a little bit more interesting and bring some definition back in to the model, because we are lacking it a little bit, particularly on the apron now, because it's such a dominant color currently that we need to do something to pull that back a little bit. So we'll just go around any seams and edges and add that as a little bit of a dirty shade. And we'll also use it to tackle the bow down here on the back of the straps, and we'll probably do it with the straps as well. So also we'll do where these little flaps of material have torn away. And then we'll see what we've got after this. So let's look at what the sepia wash is doing for us and where we've applied it. So we've obviously applied it into the shadows, so in under her bust, in and around the ruffles on the top of the apron, and then I've went down and done little additions down on the bottom of the apron just to force a little bit of shadow in there and make that shadow look a little bit dirty and nasty. And particularly up here on the wrist, what I've done is applied some wash flicking up and a little line underneath. So hammering a bit of shadow and a bit more dirt into her general appearance. And I think that's looking okay. We've done the same on the ruffles on the back there as well. So with that done and looking quite okay, I think quite okay is a good descriptive, nasty. We're going to move on to the skin. So I really want her to be pale, messed up looking. So what I'm going to go for is bony spikes with a little drop of Dorado skin added into that, just to take away from the complete paleness of it. In reality, I should probably go more green and make that more a sickly tone, but I think the bony spikes is already quite nasty enough as it is. It's already quite pale. I don't really want to humanize that skin tone too much, but at the same time I don't want it to just look like a bone color, so that's why we're adding the little drop of Dorado into the mix there. So let's throw that together, and what I'm going to try and do is make that sort of undeathly kind of look appear through washes and shading. I want the washes and shading, like on the apron, to be the part that makes you go, ugh, there's something not right about that, or that's dirty or grotty. So I want hints of, in the skin tone, I kind of want hints of a human skin tone, but at the same time, we're going to add in ways and means of making it look a lot more messed up. So we'll just go on ahead. I'm using a small brush again, just to be careful around the work I've already done. And we're just going to apply the skin tone. We're not going to worry about the eyes or anything just yet. We're just going to get the skin tone down. So with the skin now done, the base coat of the skin now down, I'm going to start toning it a little bit, because I still want this to be pale, but I also want it to be a bit unnatural in a way. So what I'm going to try and do is use a little bit of purple tone and try and apply that pretty thinly, I think, because this particular tone is quite strong, and the aim is to try and just get her to look a little odd. Now, the purple tone, in all honesty, might make her look a little bit like Ursula from Little Mermaid, but I think it should help hammer in a little bit of unnaturalness about her. I'm trying to make it so that I'm more focusing on getting her skin to just look very strange and pallid and discolored. So let's see what this does, and after that we can move on and see what else we need to do. So the purple tone is now dry on her skin, and she looks absolutely disgusting, which is pretty much what we want. So what I would need to do now is sort of highlight this skin up a little bit. This is a tricky one because I'm not quite sure what way I want to do it. I want it to be pale, I want it to be off color, just a bit messed up. So what I'm thinking of doing is taking the bony spikes that I used before for the base color, but mix in a little bit of gray this time. So let's see. Let's just have a look. If I just do a little dollop of the gray, and then a little bit of the bony spikes, probably looking at, say, a 50-50 on this. I have a feeling the grey should probably have been a little bit of a darker grey, because what we're going to end up getting here is probably quite a pale colour, but that necessarily won't be a bad thing either. So you see the sort of colour we're getting in the background there. Based against the original skin tone, it's a lot paler, and I think that's going to work out for us. So let's take it to the model, and what I want to do is sort of pick out some of her higher details, so like the tops of her cheekbones there. Sort of like that. And I think just working around all the skin, I'm going to need to go off camera to get a nice, good, close look at this as I'm doing it. But I think those colors are probably going to work out fine. So let's try that out and see what we get. All right, so I think I'm happy where the skin has gone to. It's it's just really unpleasant to look at. Let's make it more unpleasant. So we're going to move on to the teeth, and for the teeth what I'm going to do is return to my bony spikes, and we're just going to put some straight bony spikes onto her teeth. This is going to be part of probably a couple steps to do the mouth, because she is going to be wearing lipstick, unfortunately. It's gonna look absolutely friggin' horrifying. Tell I am enjoying the painting, but at the same time I'm like, oh, she looks horrible. So just get our bony spikes in there, give her that nice big smile, I guess, that sort of rigor mortis kind of stuck together sort of look. I'm kind of trying to just get the teeth, and I think I'm trying to leave the gums in that sort of, almost that base grey, because it has a little bit of the purple tone on it, and I don't, I kind of don't want to lose that look. I don't want to lose that really weird dead flesh look about it. I'm trying, it's always, especially when you're left-handed like this and you're approaching at such a weird angle all the time, you have to get creative with how you hold the model. I think that looks even enough, and I absolutely still hate it. So there's that. We're going to probably have to leave that to dry. So yeah, we're probably going to leave that to dry. I think on the back to the skin real quick, we're going to take another little touch of sepia tone, because what I need is to force a little bit more shadow back into that skin. And what we're going to be doing there is just going back around the inner edges of her apron and clothing and just reinforcing that brown sort of dirty shadow. I hate the fact that she has cleavage like this, and just make it look nice and nasty, but it also helps define the change between what is meant to be skin and what is meant to be clothing. So that's it certainly serves that purpose too. It's great. Now with the sepia on in and around the clothing there a little bit more, it's just sort of hammering home a little bit more shadow. We are going to move back to the teeth, and again we are just taking some sepia and just gonna work that in to that disgusting mug. Oh, I hate it so much. Oh, I absolutely hate it so much. Okay, while that's drying, we're going to start work on the eyes. And of course the eyes are going to be completely freaky and weird. So we're going to take some space dust. And what I have here already is the highlight color for the skin. And I'm going to use that again, but we're going to mix in a little bit of our space dust, so it's sort of pale yellow. And what I want is a very sickly kind of yellow tone. So we'll bring a bit of this highlight color out, and then we'll chuck a bit of the yellow into it and see what we get out of that. I do need it to stand out from the rest, but because this is essentially, the yellow part is going to be the whites of the eyes, it just needs to stand out from the skin enough. I think we're pretty close there, so we're going to have like a very, very sort of awful pale yellow in the eyes. Might actually need to be a bit more yellow than that, so let's up that tone a little. Yeah, I think that's the right direction. So we'll go ahead and get the rest of these, or get the two eyes painted in as neatly as possible. Alright, so I've done a couple of things off camera just to sort of speed my process up a little bit. The eyes are painted in that mix that we made, that sort of lighter pale yellow. I've also added the same pale yellow to the bottle to make it look like slightly past its sell-by date milk. And then I've also taken the straight yellow, which the space dust is, and just painted in the eyes of our poor little dinner slash snack there. So from there, we're going to move on and we're going to add some more color. And in this one, we're going to be doing Resplendent Red. And this is for her god-awful lipstick. Oh, I don't know how I feel about this model at all. I mean, I know I like to look at it, but I mean, painting it's a whole other thing. So, do we care for neat? Do we care if it's a bit messed up? Probably not. I mean, her face is definitely sort of Ursula. Ursula is definitely the character that springs to mind. I know Jerry's told me she's based off someone else, but Ursula is definitely the one that springs to mind when I see that smile. Okay. Then the upper lip, which I can barely see from where I'm sitting. My eyesight's terrible. It really doesn't matter if I'm a bit uneven with it. Makes her look like she's bleeding out her nose now. Take that up and make sure that joins up there. Okay, well, that's not horrifying at all. So, with that down, what I'm going to do real quick is her pupils. And her pupils, we're using a black pen because I'm going to cheat, because I'm terrible. So, what I want to do here is just dabs a pen there. So this is the part where we mess up. So hey, that's not bad. She looks a bit messed up, but I mean, look at her. That immediately adds so much horrifying detail. I hate it. So while we're at it, we'll do a couple of slit eyes on our sort of little octopus guy. There we go. Who says you can't cheat and still look good? So, with the eyes done, my god, that is horrifying. That splash of colour really does make a heck of a difference. I'm also, just because of expediency, I'm just going to take the same resplendent red and just paint the top of the bottle, make it look like an old, crappy, sort of kind of half-baked rubber, I guess. I know they wouldn't be rubber in sort of particular times, but, you know, we can just, for brevity's sake and for just adding a bit more colour to the model, I think that's what we need to do. So, keep that nice and neat, and then we can give that a wash once it's dry. On to our next bit of colour, which is going to be, God, I can't look at her face. We're going to move on to Alien Purple. This is going to be for our little guy on the ladle. So nothing fancy with this, we just want to get him to be purple. I reckon that's going to be the best way to do it, is to just paint him purple. So I wonder, should I risk a slightly larger brush on this one? Maybe. Regardless, we're going to do this, and after that I think we're going to move on to painting the ladle itself. Alright, so with the purple on our little guy all done, we are going to move on and shade him down, and for that we're going to be using some purple tone. Pretty self-explanatory, so we'll do that real quick. And yeah, I'll get a decent sized brush, put a little bit of water on it. And then we will shade this little fella in. Be careful of the eyes. Just let that purple tone get in everywhere it needs to be. Try and not make it too messy. Like that. So that'll do for the purple tone there. Now, the next thing we're going to move on to is another tone, and this one is going to be red. And what we're going to do with our red tone is we're going to outline the eyes of our little squid guy, as well as the eyes and the lips and the bottle top on Nanny herself. So we'll probably try and do her sort of gums and lipstick first. Just to try and add a little bit of depth to that, because it is quite flat as it currently is. God, that face is so unsettling. So not too much around the mouth. Now, eyes are going to be interesting. Going to need a bit more on the brush than that. Take it a little bit around the upper and lower eyelids. Something more like that, and you can see the difference between the two there for that. So let's do the other one. See if we can try and keep it even. Not bad, quite manic looking. And then we'll do around the little squid's eyes. We can afford to be a little bit more ham-fisted with these ones. Not even that worried if it bleeds a little bit. Yeah, makes things look a little more interesting. And then on the bottle top, just to shade that in a touch. Something like that. Now, from there, let me think for a little sec. We're going to take another tone here, and we're going to take some strong tone. Drop a little bit of that onto the palette. And this is just to stain up our milk bottle a little bit. So we're going to try and thin that out a touch. We might need to come back to some strong tone later, but right now we're going to try and thin it and then use it to tint and shade in the milk bottle a little. Sort of more, as you can see there, just up on the grey part of it, and that, the way that's settling there looks quite good. Is there anywhere else we want a little bit of strong tone? Do we want to punch any shadows a little harder? Probably not right now. I think she looks fine as she is. The next thing then is onto a little bit of metallic. For that we're going to be using a little touch of gunmetal. And this will be for her ladle. It'll come out of the bottle, there we go. This is definitely one of the more involved 3CUs I've done in quite a while, so yeah, we'll see how this ends up. So we're just going to carefully, neatly paint in this ladle. That wash around there should be dry around the little octopus guy. So let's just sort this out and then we can let it dry. So with the ladle painted in, what I also did was take some of our Brigade Grey and just gave this piece of cloth just a little bit of a rough coat. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with it, but I think it's a better contrast that it's a lighter color, and then we can work it back down again. So want to stick with the ladle for a minute or two, and I'm trying to find there we are. What I want to use is some rust tone. This seems like it needs a good shake for whatever reason, and we're going to apply that to the ladle once I stop destroying my set. So give it a good shake. Let's see what this stuff is like, because I've never used the rust tone yet, so I want to see what sort of effect we get from it. And we're just going to put that onto our ladle. So let's get a bit of that, and we'll start underneath here and see what we get, because I kind of thought a nice rusty ladle would be quite interesting. So let's work it around and see what this does for us. Hopefully it's quite interesting. Yeah, it looks quite interesting, that's for sure. And then we'll take it up the handle. I was going to put some rust effect paint that we have onto it, but it's kind of more of a textured paint, and I don't really want to start ruining the lines or the details by just adding some texture. I thought maybe just make the ladle look a little more messy rather than outright ruined. So that, and up around the top. That ought to do the trick. So that dulls that down rather nice. Then I think just because we have the cloth done, what I want to do is sort of tone it down a little bit as well, and I'm trying to figure out what sort of tone I want to go for it, because I have quite a few sat around here now. I think we'll return to some sepia. I think I'll just move out here. We'll put some sepia down on that, and what I'll do is very quickly sort of maybe add a couple of shades here. So let's start with the sepia. Just work that in, and it shouldn't matter if it gets onto the darker material. It shouldn't add anything to that very much. We've sort of already made it look a bit too close to the apron, but it's going to look a little bit different now. I think as well, while I'm at it, I'll take a little bit of strong tone. You can tell I didn't plan this at all. I haven't figured out what I was doing with this model. So before we apply the strong tone, I'm going to lift a lot of the excess sepia from this part, and then we'll take our strong tone and we'll just sort of dapple it onto the cloth. Try and make it look rather stained and messy. something like that. And we'll hopefully when that dries, that'll look a bit more interesting. So we're at the point where I would say we're just about finished. And the last thing I want to do is highlight up our little squid guy. And for that, I'm going to use some pink potion. So we'll just put a bit of that out on the palette. Apparently we need to shake it first, because that's the one thing with most Army Painter range, is when they're left for a while, the medium tends to float to the top and the pigment settles in the bottom. So you got to give them a good old shake to bring it all up. Now, to highlight our little squid guy, what I kind of want to do is maybe thin it a bit more, actually make it more of a layer. Something like that. And I just want to pick out as you can see, I'm doing like tiny little lines, little hatch marks across the upper parts. Sort of give them that something of a sort of a wet sheen, but it's not really going to be looking like that much of a wet sheen. But he needs something, so we're going to try our best and do a little bit of something just to make him look a little more interesting. So we'll do that, and I think bar this one last thing I want to do, which is kind of annoying, I'm going to take a bit more of our Brigade Grey here that's still on the palette, because I think the glass on our bottle here needs a bit of a shimmer. So we'll do a little line there and run that down the side of the bottle. Take a bit more. Try to make that look a little more apparent. So I'll do a dot up at the top, a little line there, and a little there. It's not much, but it helps. So we will finish highlighting the squid, then we'll give everything a matte varnish and do the base in flat black. And when we come back, you'll see the model completely finished. So here we have Nanny all finished, a little bit of a matte varnish and just tidy the base up a little bit there. And we have this relatively, well, very creepy lady trying to serve someone a squid with a bottle of sour milk in her hand. And I did enjoy painting this, and it's not like my usual painting videos of recent years anyway, where I kind of have an idea in my head already. I have some of the paint set out. It was kind of more freeform, and that's what I enjoy from time to time, is just going, okay, I don't know what I'm doing with this. I'm going to chuck a bunch of paint on the table and just see how it goes and what we come up with. And I think what I've come up with is pretty decent. I'm actually quite confident in this one for a change. I quite like how it's turned out. There's always room for improvement, of course, but I think this is definitely one of my better painting videos, I think, of recent times anyway, because we're not trying to do it to match an army project or anything like that. And because Moonstone is a relatively small model count skirmish game, I feel like you can always go that little extra just to make your model stand out a bit more and be a bit more unique. So that's kind of what I aimed for as a base principle, and I think the execution has turned out quite well. I'm quite happy with it. So as always, you guys can let me know in the comments what you think of it. And until next time, take care, stay safe, and see you again very soon.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.